Hi, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us. As always, I'm here with Jennifer Blum, domestic violence survivor and director and founder of the Help Save Foundation. I'm Sherry Pettipass, licensed independent clinical social worker. Welcome to week number 8 of our Facebook Live podcast on domestic violence. Last week, we discussed the critical importance of victim impact statements. And this week, our focus is going to be on why seeking some type of counseling or support from an outside professional source can be very important once a survivor has left an abusive relationship. We reviewed the different types of domestic abuse, so please note when we refer to an abusive relationship during today's podcast, we're referring to all of them. Before we get started, we just want to remind everyone of some very important emergency numbers. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, or you can text HOME to 741-741. And of course, in case of emergency, please dial 911. In addition, you can always reach myself or Jen through the Help Save Foundation. Jen, do you want to give them that website?
It's the helpsavefoundation.org, and you can also find us on Facebook by just putting in the Help Save Foundation. And any questions or comments or future shows that you would like to see us do, please go ahead and send it over to us, because we've really been working basically solely based off of what you guys have been requesting. So go ahead and send us your requests and let us know what you think, and we'll get it on and start talking about it. So today, again, as Sherry said, we're going to be talking about counseling and therapy and the different reasons that you should do it, especially coming out of a domestic violence relationship. I personally did it for myself, which I found extremely helpful, especially in allowing me to move forward with my life. And had I not done it, I'm not exactly sure that I would be in the place I am today. So, you know, in anything, taking the first steps to get out of an abusive relationship can be very scary and hard. But it's more than worth it, for sure. There is nothing that can mentally prepare anyone for the physical and mental outcomes of domestic violence. Abusive relationships are notoriously difficult for an abusive person to leave. And even once they do, many people struggle. They struggle with depression, they struggle with anxiety, stress, or general emotional disorder. And one of the biggest things that most people do suffer from is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's all following domestic violence. Now, domestic violence counseling can play an invaluable role in helping people overcome an abusive situation. Again, like I said, it certainly did for me. Having domestic counseling services readily available can make people in abusive relationships feel more confident about leaving an abusive partner. Support makes all the difference, whether it's someone that is leaving an abusive situation and still in it, or someone that has already left an abusive situation. It's very, very important to have some kind of counseling set up. We're so lucky today because we live in a world where online counseling is readily available. And to those who can't get out of the house or physically can't see a counselor for reasons of their abuser, or just reasons that they absolutely do not want to sit in front of a counselor. Online counseling has become a great tool for people living with a variety of conditions and the healing process from different experiences, including and especially domestic violence. Just like in-person therapy, online counseling is conducted by licensed therapists and counselors. And they're very well versed in everything that going into an office and seeing a counselor. It's the same thing, except it's online. It's in the privacy of your own home. Mm-hmm. Unlike traditional therapy, though, you'll have the freedom to be able to message your counselor at any times throughout the day and night. And, you know, I do know a lot of counselors today. Sherry, I know you're one of them that, you know, if you need them, they are going to be there for you any time of the day. It's not a matter of, okay, the doors close at 6 o'clock. If you're in a situation that you truly need help and you need to speak to someone immediately, they're there for you.
Right. And I just want to interject that for 1 second, Jen. I don't mean to cut you off, but so you have the option, obviously, as Jen just said, to do so there's options like BetterHelp, besides just obviously going through an individual therapist like myself, that you do the online where you can just message somebody, and again, at any time they can answer you back. So if you have a question about something, and again, sometimes people only feel comfortable in that scenario where they they're not at a point yet that they can literally verbalize what's going on with them or verbalize the questions that they're having. And so sometimes literally the first step for them is, let me just get something on paper, or let me, obviously something, written down in text, and send that off. And just that step alone is a huge step for some people. And so, they get to sit and succinctly think about what they're going to say, and then they send it off to a licensed clinician. And then the other options, when we talk about doing online therapy, is you also have the telehealth option, which is doing it over the phone. And so you can also have a conversation with somebody, again, in the privacy and safety of your own home, with a licensed clinician on the other line. And again, if you don't feel comfortable going to the office, you don't have to do that. And then you have the other option, kind of like what we're doing here, where you meet with the therapist one-to-one, but you're doing it through the computer. And so you can actually meet with the therapist, see their face. You get to have that one-to-one, but you can again do that through the privacy of your own home. And that has been very helpful, obviously, because of COVID, but that doesn't mean that that is not something that has been, that wasn't already in place prior to COVID, and it won't be in place after COVID. It is an option, that many therapists offer. And I do believe, especially because of COVID, will be continued to offer, and I think it's important that for some people, they should, if that is something that they want, you should absolutely look at any therapist that does offer that. If that is, you have to consider your comfort level and consider what you think is going to work for you. And if the thought, again, of leaving your home or meeting somebody, again, a stranger, face to face in an office, really scares you at this point, then again, there are so many options now, like Jen pointed out, that I do encourage you to seek those options, because again, there's just so many varieties of ways that you can do that.
And, for a lot of people, especially if you're involved in a domestic situation or a domestic relationship right now, a counselor is the first person that they're talking to, the first person that they're telling. And I know for me, I had never been to counseling before this. And so me sitting in front of a counselor the first time, I was like so nervous. I didn't know what to do. I was worried that I was going to cry. I was going to be too emotional. Were they going to think I was crazy? And so, for some people, the online part of it might be better suited for you, because just going in and having to deal with all of your emotions with somebody in front of you, depending on, like Sherry said, your comfort level. Are you shy? I wasn't super outgoing until after all of this happened, just because I was sheltered and scared and nervous and all those other emotions for so darn long, that when it came to actually sitting down with the counselor, I was actually nervous. And I kept thinking to myself, like, are they going to believe me? A lot of crazy stuff has happened to me. Are they actually going to believe anything that's happened, or am I going to be wasting my time telling somebody? So I do completely, I haven't done the online counseling myself. I wish I had a better idea of that prior to going into counseling, because I think I probably would have felt a little bit more comfortable going into counseling, knowing that I didn't have to sit face to face and worrying about whether my face was going to turn red or my eyes were going to start to water because I was going to get emotional. Again, typically going into counseling, it's the first people that you're telling. Now, we've done a lot of podcasts at this point, and we've talked to you guys a lot about the fact that being there for people, friends, family members, is extremely important. And we stand by the fact that it is extremely important to be there for people. Understand that the reason that counseling is just as important is because you as a friend, or you as a family member, have a connection to that person. And because you have a connection to that person, they could be telling you, they could be spilling their whole life out. And the entire time you're trying to protect them. So you're saying things that maybe aren't extremely as helpful as they could be. You don't understand the situation, and you've never been in the situation yourself. So a lot of times people add opinions that aren't necessarily warranted, because these men and women, they truly just need to speak to somebody and have them understand and help them get to a place where they're feeling better about themselves. Not all of us can do that as friends, because again, we're emotionally attached to the person that we're trying to help. And so if you suspect that a friend or loved one, maybe in an abusive relationship, do not hesitate to bring up to them about a counselor. There's nothing wrong with that. And it is better to take the risk in bringing it up and having them reject it, even though it may feel uncomfortable. than to stand by and do absolutely nothing at all. We don't want you to stand by and do nothing. We want you to kind of have the tools that you need to be able to help friends or family. And sometimes we can't be that. That needs to go one step further, and that one step further is counseling. So things that you can do to be kind of prepared for this is, start by looking for a counselor that they can reach out to and that you can kind of present them with. And please understand that in many cases, the first counselor that you go to or that you meet may not be a good fit for you. I'll tell you, the first counselor that I went to, I originally went to him because another family member of my abuser had gone to them, someone that's actually not for my abuser, but saw things that happened and actually took very good care of myself and the boys and stood by us 100%. And so I originally started going to a counselor that she was going to because I understood that the things that happened to me in my story of 13 years of abuse was absolutely crazy. And so I wanted to go to someone who could validate things that had already happened because they had already heard about it from the third party, which had nothing to do with my situation, meaning me coming forward. But that person was not a good fit for me at all. That counselor he was just a counselor that had never he dealt with trauma, but I was actually his first domestic violence victim ever. And so after about 4 or 5 sessions with him, I realized this isn't going anywhere. He's not helping me heal. It was going backwards versus forward. So from that point on, it took me a little while, and I did take a break. And I will admit that I was kind of defeated and felt like, am I going to find someone that's going to help me get back to where I need to be? And eventually I did find that person, and she was able to truly helped me get my self-worth back, realize who I was as a person, realize that everything that I had gone through was truly not my fault, and helped me heal and allow me to have relationships from that point on that were healthy relationships. Now, one of the reasons I really wanted to do this podcast on this today is because I've worked with a lot of women, and I'm going to say women because that's been the majority that this has been happening with. I've worked with so many women within the past few years that they get out of abusive, toxic relationship and immediately get into another one. And then they're calling me and they're looking for help again. And I say, okay, well, what led you back? Because they're constantly feeling like it's them. Well, I keep meeting losers. I keep meeting people that are abusive to me. And my best suggestion, and the one thing that I say to them all the time, my first question is, what have you done for yourself? How have you made yourself validated in this world? Have you allowed yourself to heal? Have you allowed yourself to trust again? Do you feel like you could be loved? Do you feel worthy of being loved? A lot of the women that I work with, they don't. And so instead of taking that time to really work on themselves, they jump back into another relationship and they go back to being treated the way they were treated when they just left because they don't know any better. And because they feel so negative about themselves from being beat down for however long they have. And I'm talking emotionally, mentally, not just physically. I always say that the emotional and mental abuse was 10 times worse than the physical abuse for me. I could deal with my beatings. They stopped. But the emotional and the mental abuse never stopped. That was something that was ongoing on an everyday basis. So you have to break that cycle yourself as far as the people you want to allow in your life. And you have to realize who you are, and you have to heal prior to getting into another relationship. And I see time and time again, women go from one very toxic relationship to meeting somebody else that's just as toxic. And for me, I say all the time, my first question is, what have you done for yourself? Have you gone to any counseling? Have you talked to anybody? Have you worked on yourself, whether it be in a gym, whether it be, meditation, yoga, anything? And it doesn't even have to be any of those things. It has to be an outlet in which you can express yourself and not be judged by anyone, family, friends, or anybody. And be able to just release things that you need to release, not only about what happened to you, but about what your dreams and aspirations are and where you want to go from this point. So I tell people that, again, you might not meet your ideal counselor the first time you go to a counselor. And you might be a couple sessions in, but don't give up and continue to be open-minded and looking for another counselor. Um, it's really about finding who is right for you. And once you find who's right for you, um, I think that where the healing comes in is you realizing your own self-worth. And I truly can't emphasize that enough, because after being in an abusive relationship, you don't come out of there with much self-worth. So that's what I have. That's how I feel about the situation. And Sherry's going to talk to you a little bit more about the counseling part from her end as a counselor.
Mhm. So I think I've said this before to everybody when we've done podcasts that, obviously because of COVID, Jen and I don't do this together. We, in the sense that, we know the topic we're going to talk about, and then we kind of do our own thing, and then we come together, we talk about it again, and then we come together and do the podcast. And the reason why I say that is because we both really, regardless of where we're coming from in this, whatever my job is, her job is, where she's coming from, her experience, although obviously I would never say that I understand where Jen is coming from. I have not been through her experience, but I will say this: we always have so much of the same things that we want to talk about, and I actually love that, because I think that what's important is that it kind of like really hammers the points home that, what we want to say. And so I will start even just kind of flowing right from that point of what Jen was saying. Like, if you walk into an office, or you're doing online or whatever you're doing, and that person does not feel right to you, you do not feel comfortable. I will tell you, at least so again, this is obviously from my perspective, but when I meet with somebody, one of the first things I tell them during their intake is, if at any time you do not feel comfortable with me, if you feel like we're not clicking, whatever it may be, I tell them, please let me know, and I will refer you if you would like me to. I don't have to. If you feel like that's very awkward or uncomfortable, that's completely understandable, but I let them know that I would be more than happy to refer them to somebody else. And I would do that for them. I will do the work for them. I'll try to find somebody, because 100%, this is not about me. It is about them, and making sure that they have the right person to support them. In addition, when you are having that conversation, as Jen pointed out, about, trying to help maybe find somebody, you know, sometimes what happens and puts people off is well, you need help and you need to go talk to somebody. And sometimes when we come across that way, it continues, that cycle of that stigma about mental health treatment and counseling. Like, there's something wrong with you, and so you need to go get help. You need to go talk to someone because there's something wrong. And maybe making sure that we put it in a different way. Have you thought about maybe getting some support? Have you talked to somebody, maybe again outside of your family, somebody who's objective? There's other ways to ask someone or advocate, so that you can come across again in a less judgmental way, or again accusatory way. That again, we don't want someone to feel like counseling is just because somebody needs to be fixed, because that's not what it's about. Anyone, I say I truly believe there is still this misconception about what therapy is. And, I get that it may not be for everybody, and that's okay. But I do believe that there really needs to be a healthy outlet for people to process difficult situations and feelings, trauma and loss. It is very important for people to have that. And I will tell you that statistics honestly do show that if two people witness or experience the same traumatic event, one of the main reasons that they may differ greatly in their symptoms of PTSD and prognosis toward healing is what immediate and ongoing supports they receive from family, friends, coworkers, and yes, mental health professionals, whether individually or in a group setting. People often ask that question. Well, how come, great example, when you think about veterans, maybe they experienced the same situation, the same event. How come over here you have this person who is truly struggling, and their symptoms are so exasperated, and maybe they're struggling with an addiction and other issues, and over here this person has gone through the same event, and yet for some reason they seem to be going through the healing process, and they seem to have at least gotten to a place of being able to at least talk about their trauma. And you just see two different, and again, yes, everybody's different, but my point is that it is a fact that if this person over here, the first person, got absolutely no support, has been isolating, and has basically just been reliving this trauma over and over again on their own. And this other person is not going through that, and they have gotten supports, again, have gotten counseling, they are seeing professionals, they have family supports, people who love and care about them, and they're not isolating. It is there are very, very different outcomes. And it's the same thing with domestic violence, any type of trauma. So, when we do talk about counseling, I'm telling you, it is a key factor, in the process, whichever kind that you choose. Again, whether it's text messaging, what we're talking about, like something like a BetterHelp, which you can do online, whether it's, again, online like this, face-to-face, but not in the office, or, telehealth on the phone or in person. It is very important. And one of the things that, I just want to point out that is important, I think, for everybody to understand is that when we talk about trauma and PTSD, it's not just, people think it's just, flashbacks and nightmares, but it is not just that. It is an entire physiological response. And so there's so much work that needs to go into that. And it is having a nightmare, having a flashback, yes, that's part of it, but there's also other things that happen that trigger these other physiological responses. So sounds and smells and thoughts and, other things that people say, and understand it is a full body trauma response. And a lot of what is worked on in counseling is trying to almost, almost trick the body, into understanding that what happened in the past is in the past, and what we're dealing with right now is the present, and how to work on grounding techniques and how to bring you into the present, and giving you a safe space to have these conversations. And it's not to say that friends and family obviously aren't important, because as we've both said, you are key factors in this, but that's not, your role isn't to do the therapy part. Your role isn't to know all of these things. Your role isn't to understand fully that, what a trauma response is. Your role isn't to understand how to do grounding techniques, and how to do that in therapy. When we start doing trauma work, when I have conversations with somebody about their past trauma history, I do grounding before we even start that conversation, because I need to make sure that they know that they're in the present right now before we even start having that conversation, to remind their mind and their body that they're in a safe space, and that when we have the conversation about the past, that's the past, and that's the kind of work that we're doing.
I just want to interrupt for
No,
one
go ahead,
second,
go ahead.
because from my standpoint, as far as counseling and as far as the different triggers, right? The most important thing that I took out of counseling was how to deal with those triggers, how to understand situations that I was in. For instance, for me, I cannot be in large crowds. If I am in a large crowd, and I think a lot of that for me has to deal with the fact that as long as my abuser is still alive, I'm still in a situation where, and if he ever gets out of jail, I go back to the same place again. I'm back in danger, because I know that there's nothing more than he wants than for me to be dead. So for me, because in my case, there were so many different things. Private investigators were brought in from his side to try to discredit me in every way possible. They were not able to do any of it. But I knew prior to anybody else that there were people following me. And so that's an issue for me moving forward. When I'm in large crowds, I wonder who else is in that crowd. Is it someone that's possibly watching me for my abuser? Is it someone that now knows where I am? So I had to learn, and counseling helped me tremendously find my comfort zone with the people around me that I feel will protect me, that I feel will make sure that I'm okay. I do not go into large crowds or large areas with specific people. If they're going to those places, I immediately say no, because I'm not comfortable and I don't believe that they'll be able to protect me the way I need to be protected. Now, that's very important, and I needed to learn that in counseling. I needed to learn how to deal with certain situations like that. Same thing with very simply people who raise their voice. I can't be around a man who raises his voice. It doesn't work for me. Now, there's many situations where you're in a situation where someone raises their voice. Now, I had to learn how to mentally take myself out of that situation that I immediately are brought back to. And when I say that, I'm talking like tremors. I'm starting to sweat. I'm extremely nervous. I'm trying to figure out where the hell the exit is, because I got to get out of here as soon as possible, because these are triggers for me. But I learned through counseling how to calm myself down, how
Mhm.
to take a look at my surroundings, realize when I walk into a place, I know every single exit that's there. When I walk into a place, everybody that's with me knows that my back is never against the door. I have to know who's coming in at all times. I completely scope the entire place out of where I am to see who I'm dealing with and if I feel like any of those people are a threat to me. Now, those strategies helped me get out back into society because I was a hermit and I wasn't doing those things because I was so afraid, because I didn't have those techniques, because I didn't understand that there were things I could do to help myself realize, okay, none of these people here are here to hurt you, so you're safe now and you're okay. I mean, I didn't go out for a while in the beginning because I was so damn afraid of the people around me. Um, but I learned how to cope with those situations. And I would not have been able to do any of that if it weren't for the counseling that I went through and had someone that said, hey, listen, these are your triggers. So we're going to work on how we're going to get you to not be bothered by this so that you can enjoy life and continue on the way you're supposed to continue on without being stressed out and having to exit places and leave and having panic attacks because you don't know what's going on around you. So not to interfere, but I mean, it's so important to understand that this is what they do. It's not just about going and talking to someone and letting them listen to you. They're going to pick out these things that are triggers for you. They're going to pick up these things that are a bother to you, and they're going to help you be able to continue life by giving you strategies on how you can get past those. It's very important.
It is. I agree with you. And I feel like, and again, it's and sometimes, I know I never know if I'm going to meet somebody. I shouldn't say meet somebody, excuse me. I never know if I'm going to meet with somebody for a second time. And so, I try even in the first session to give them, even if it's just one grounding technique to take with them, because you don't know, if someone's going to come back. You don't know if they, open up to you that one time, and that can be very overwhelming, to know that they've opened up, all of these wounds. And and the truth is that, the other important part that I also bring up to them is knowing that when you do that, you're going to start experiencing a lot of symptoms, because that's just what happens. You start to bring up, you start to have a conversation, you start to talk about your history of trauma. And so all the things that maybe you have been trying to not think about and kind of push down for a while, all of that's going to start coming up again. So you're probably going to have an increase in nightmares and sleepless nights, and an increase in anxiety, and probably anger and irritability and mood lability and all of these things. And so it's not comfortable, and so it's also very important to know that. And obviously, the therapist should be telling you that this is going to be a very uncomfortable, few weeks or months or however long, but it does eventually, there is a reason for that. And we are getting to, before we get to the healing process, but it will happen. But you need to know that. And in so doing, you have to also be giving techniques along the way, because you can't just let's just sit and tell me all these terrible things and then be off on your way, and good luck, because it doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
So you need to make sure that you're giving these techniques, and we do that. And so again, it is not to say that, again, that everybody else is not a great support, because you are. But the reason we do what we do is this is what we've been trained in, and this is the experience that we have. And so, we work with just survivors of trauma all the time, and obviously everybody's different, but many of the techniques we use obviously are the same across the board. But there are a few different types of therapies, and I'm just going to mention one today, that is specific to PTSD, in case anyone just hasn't heard of it. It's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it is specifically to work with PTSD and trauma survivors. But I will also say that, I do work with people who around their finances, like that we have to sit sometimes and do a few sessions on how to rebuild your credit and open up a savings account. And we sit and I have them go and start a notebook with, especially if all of a sudden they've just started overspending on things, and, whatever it may be. And we just sit and we start focusing, and we set goals and of savings and things like that. So that's also part of it. And I'm not saying that can't happen with again, friends, families, coworkers, but that is also sometimes part of it. Like, there's so many facets to it. because there has to be an understanding that this is a whole system here. And like we talked about before, Jen and myself, that, you know, when we talk about abusive relationships, there's so many different types of abuse, and we have to be talking about all of them. And so sometimes, again, a lot of our conversation is healing from sexual abuse and sexual trauma, and having those conversations. And I can almost guarantee family and friends aren't going to want to have those conversations with people, and they shouldn't be. You know, that's not your role, and that's not a disrespectful thing, but it's not. You know, your role is to be a friend, and your role is to be a family member, a brother, a sister, a parent. That's your role. You know, my role is to be that non-judgmental, objective person, to listen and to work on the healing process with them, and to have those really difficult conversations with them.
And another thing too, you know, like when you talk about nightmares and stuff like that, a lot of times just taking yourself out of chaos is huge. Like, I had been in a chaotic situation for so long that once I was away from it, I almost didn't know how to react to peace. I had to learn how to react to peace. Counseling played a huge role in that, because I didn't know what it was like to relax. I didn't know what it was like to go to a home where I wasn't going to be screamed at, that I wasn't on the edge of my seat waiting for someone to come home and hit me, hurt me, whatever. I remember the first month of leaving, I cried myself to sleep most every single night. And this was before I had started counseling. And I kept trying to figure out, like, why do I feel like this? Like, I'm finally free. Why the heck am I feeling so odd about the fact that I finally got away? And it was through counseling that I realized that I was so used to chaos that I didn't understand peace. And so it took me a while, and it took me many sessions of trying to realize that life was supposed to be about peace. It wasn't supposed to be about chaos. So for me, like, I wasn't having dreams or anything like that. I was having a hard time dealing with the fact that everything around me was calm and peaceful, because I had never lived that. I didn't know what that was on a day-to-day. And I was very thankful that I learned how to find peace in my life so that I didn't feel like that anymore. And I didn't want that chaos. And again, it goes back to what I think I said earlier, as far as the cycle.
Yes.
And as far as, you know, people are concerned with, you know, what they're used to. If you don't work on yourself and you don't do those things for yourself, you're going to go back to what norm is to you. And I chose not to do that. And I wish for so many of my women that they would also choose not to do that. But it comes with the counseling and the healing and understanding what life is supposed to be outside of being a domestic violence survivor.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what I was just thinking when you said that about the cycle, and the chaos, because when you're so used to something and it's not there anymore, it's very hard to get used to that until you obviously want to go back to what you're used to, regardless of how dangerous it was, regardless of how awful it was. And so that's what it gets back to, that your body honestly is so used to that. Like, that's what's normal for it. It is used to feeling that constant, that hypervigilance, that constant anxiety. So all of the feelings that your body constantly has, when it doesn't have that anymore, it doesn't know what to do with itself. And so now it's a matter of being able to retrain it to understand that that's not, like Jen said, that's not what normal life is about. You know, I know I just talked, you know, a whole chunk of, you know, we do all these things in treatment and we work on trauma, and I'm not saying that all that doesn't happen, but the truth is, you know, just sometimes having a space to be heard, just having a safe space, you know, is what we try to offer people. Just knowing that you can come in this office, you know, or again online, and know that you have a safe person who is there just to listen, that is not judging you, you know, to feel not judged, to feel validated, you know, and to know your own worth and to work on that. And that's a huge piece of actually this treatment, is to work on self-worth and self-respect. You know, again, Jen mentioned that, you know, you have survivors that have spent years only hearing negative things about themselves. And I'm just going to go with females right now, but negative things about negative things about themselves as mothers, daughters, wives, employees, you know, lovers. I mean, everything. You know, you've been told day in and day out, you know, that you are inept, day in and day out that you are, you know, helpless and hopeless and useless. And so imagine hearing that every single day, and then you're going to get up one day and be like, okay, great, I'm going to find now a healthy relationship, and I'm going to find somebody who is going to treat me decently. You know, it doesn't work that way for the most part. I don't want to say everybody, but for the most part, it doesn't work that way. So a lot of this work is around rebuilding self-esteem and self-worth and self-respect and regaining one's dignity, you know. And in addition to that, working on relieving the guilt and shame, which also ties into rebuilding one's self-worth. You know, you feel that you're not worthy of respect, you know, of a respectful, loving, safe, and stable relationship. And, you know, that you'll find somebody, you know, and if you feel that way, you're going to find someone that's going to agree with you. You know, if you feel that you're not worthy of any of these things, I guarantee, as Jen mentioned, you're going to find, you know, 10 different people that are going to say, you're absolutely right, you're not worthy of those things, but you are. And that's a huge, huge, again, a huge piece of what we work on, you know, in therapy. And, you know, and again, you know, just having a space, like I said, and like Jenna said, just having someone listen, non-judgmental and objective, and just there to listen to you and to validate you. You know, as Jen said, like one of the biggest things was, you know, being nervous to walk in and not know if that person was going to not even believe what she was saying. You know, that is absolutely, you know, not our role. Our role is to again, to listen fully to what you're saying and to make sure that you 100% feel validated. And and Jen was right. I've worked with people that I literally am the first person that someone has disclosed certain traumas to, certain abuses to. And, you know, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing for a clinician to hear, that you're the first person that I've ever told this to, because it's not about me, because they don't even know me yet. But what does that mean for them, and who is it in their life that they honestly felt like there was nobody else in their life that they could have told? So who's now in their life, and how can we figure out who else is in their life that they can have at least as some kind of support? So that to me speaks volumes when you tell me that there was no one else that you could talk to. So yeah, big
I think
smile.
you know, it's and
Go ahead.
it's not even just like, I mean, I think we all need somebody, and the stereotypes behind counseling and therapy for many years. I mean, I remember people saying to me, like, what do you need to go to therapy for? And I kept thinking, did I do something wrong? Like, is there something wrong? Like, why don't people understand that you can't understand where I came from? You can't help me in those aspects. And as far as me healing, like, I remember when I first shared the fact that, you know, I was having such a hard time once I had first gotten away, because I was so used to the chaos. People looked at me like I had 10 heads. Like, why would you want to live like that? Like, why would you want to be afraid? It's not that I wanted it. It's because my natural reaction, my body, my mind, my everything about me was used to a certain pattern. And now that pattern wasn't there again. And I needed to learn how to readjust to that so that I didn't move forward with finding someone else that was going to be just as abusive or take advantage of my vulnerabilities at that point. And I was lucky enough that I'm very thankful for all the healing that I've done myself, because it is why I am who I am today. And it's why I've continued to have very healthy relationships from here on end. I could have gone down that same road, and it was just a matter of realizing that I was worth it and I am worth it. And I needed to seek somebody that was going to help me get to a point where I truly felt like I was worth it. So, you know, here we are again. I hope you guys got a lot out of this. Again, any questions that you have or comments, you know, feel free to ask. Sherry is an amazing counselor. I send people to her all the time, and all of the women I do have wonderful things to say. So I do appreciate you in what you do and what you bring to the world as far as being able to help many women, because, you know, the stigma is there. And you're there for a reason, and you're doing a fantastic job. And I truly appreciate the fact that, you know, a lot of the women that I work with, I'm very confident that when I say, this is who you need to go see and this is who you need to go call, that they're going to be taken care of appropriately, and that you're there to understand and not pass judgment and truly help them get to the place they need to be. And that speaks volumes for me, especially because, you know, I went through the gamut, and I knew what it was like to be going through different counselors. And for me to feel comfortable saying, this is where you need to go. I appreciate you so much in helping the women that I do send to you. It's awesome. And I appreciate everything that you do, because as we know, it's not an easy job. So you all have a great day. It's supposed to be beautiful all day, nice and sunny. And we will catch you back next week. If there's any topics that you would like us to really hone in on, please let us know, and we will. Otherwise, we will we'll just keep bringing you some really informative pieces. So we hope you all have a great day. Stay safe. Enjoy your friends and family. Stay safe.